All right, good morning, you guys. It's Maria, your sales trainer. Today we're talking about sustainable selling and how to get to phase two of the career. You always hear people talk about phase one, phase two, and phase three of the career. What if I told you there were some easy, actionable steps that you could take to get yourself to phase two sooner rather than later so you can kind of minimize your time spent in phase one? So listen up and tell me if this sounds like you or if you've ever felt this way while doing this career. I feel like all I do is cold call with no end in sight. I never have anything in my pipeline, and that's exhausting. I really want to level up my sales game, but I'm not really sure how to do that. You ever feel like you're just spinning your wheels, like nothing you do is helping you get where you want to be, and you're not really sure where to look for answers for that next step? Well, if that's you, you're not alone. First of all, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not weird. You're not alone. Congratulations, you are here. Rookies are in phase one. They hardly know what the heck's going on. They're just trying to figure out how to do demos and not mess that up. Once you're past that phase and you're like, hey, my demo's really good, and you're kind of feeling some of those feelings and having some of those thoughts we just talked about in the last slide, then you are here. You are in the leveling up phase between phase one and phase two. And that's a great place to be because it means it's probably time to start thinking about phase two and taking the first steps to move into the next level of this career. What is phase two? What does that look like? So phase two is the time in your career when you're not just cold calling the next business on the right, looking for a family to protect right here and right now. You're still doing that, but that's not the only thing that you know how to do. You're also doing group presentations, company enrollments, and following up with and working with your referrals. Now, it's going to be a slightly different volume for everyone. The volume is going to vary for each person, but it starts out with cold calling. In order to get to phase two, you need to know how to cold call well and be good at that first in order to get good at this other stuff. So you need to still be very intentional about using cold calling to fill your pipeline as well as capture those on-the-spot sales. So you never want to sacrifice a potential client today for a less potential appointment a week from today. Okay, so you still want to be protecting families on the spot when the opportunity presents itself, and you also will always want to be keeping an eye out for appointments, enrollments, and referrals to follow up with. Now, once an agent is fully in phase two, they should be spending about half their time cold calling or less. And then that rest of the time, you'll be meeting with referrals or meeting with groups that you have already set up from when you were spending time cold calling. So when do we start phase two? How long do we need to be in phase one before we can start thinking about phase two? Well, it's never too early to start thinking about phase two and start practicing some of these habits to really get yourself set up for that. But phase two typically starts around when you've hit your quick start bonus. So about 4 weeks in, you're probably ready to start setting up some enrollments, setting up some groups, but you can start thinking about it at your very first week in the business. Again, your main goal is to get 30 demos a week. Your main goal is you're on a scavenger hunt for those aces and you're just trying to find as many of them as soon as possible. So you're seeing lots of people and you're doing lots of demos because your first 100 demos, you guys, they're not going to be very good. And that's okay. So you want to get through your first 100 demos as soon as you can. And then phase two, you're going to be more focused on setting up enrollments and group presentations. At the very latest, guys, you'll want to start moving in this direction around 3 months. Otherwise, you're going to risk feeling super burnt out because cold calling 100% of the time is not the most sustainable method of the business. And if you're planning to be here for 5 years and get fully vested, you're going to want to make sure you're doing sustainable activities. So if it's your goal and you keep it top of mind to move into phase two as quickly as possible, then the day-to-day decisions you make will gradually lead you closer to that, right? Guys, nobody does phase one forever. People who have been here for a couple years, they're in phase two, they're in phase three of the business. Anyone who's training you, they are not doing phase one activities anymore. They still cold call, but they also have tons of referrals to meet with, and they know how to set up group presentations. So they have things in their schedule and in their pipeline to look forward to. And they use their cold calling time in between those appointments to get some on the spot clients and to fill up their pipeline and make plans for later. Now, some people love cold calling. Don't get me wrong. It's some people's favorite part of the job. They love meeting new people, having those conversations, exploring new businesses. And that's great because you're going to always be getting to meet new people and explore new businesses. But unless you have unlimited energy, which some of you definitely have, that's okay. Unless you have unlimited energy, you're going to get a little bit burnt out if all you're doing is next business on the right for 10 years in a row. So it's totally normal once you've mastered your demo to start filling up the pipeline to have other things to look forward to. Notice that I said once you've mastered your demo. If you are still struggling to get an approach, to get someone to sit down with you, then don't even worry about setting up enrollments. You need to learn how to protect one person in the field before you can worry about what do I do if there's 25 people that I need to talk to at once. Start small and we'll get there eventually. What can we do about this? What are some actionable items? So talking about filling your pipeline. So there's a concept of now money versus later money. You could also look at this as families protected today versus families protected in the future. At first, you need to focus on protecting families today, on the spot, in the here and now. Your goal whenever you walk into a business should always be to get somebody to sit down with you. I don't care if it's the secretary, an employee, an owner, a manager, just get someone to sit down with you. We're not going into a business thinking I'm just going to set up an enrollment and leave and come back later. That will happen on its own. If you're focused on just protecting families and doing demos, then naturally some people won't be able to meet with you today and they will want to set appointments. And if you're really focused on demoing all the employees today, you'll get to do that sometimes. And sometimes they'll say, hey, today's not a great day, but you can come back another day, and you'll get that on your calendar and you'll fill your pipeline that way. What you don't want to do is skip over anybody who's ready to get protected today and just be like, hey, when can I come back? Because you're here now. You're here now. You should be focused on doing a demo now. The later money and the later families protected will take care of itself if you're focused on protecting families today. You don't want to skip over, dollars to pick up nickels, so to speak. If they're here and they're ready, get them signed up. Also, guys, I can't say this loud enough. Do not cherry pick businesses. You want to still go into every single business, every single type of business, every single different industry. If your trainer has told you to skip the dollar store, that's fine. But don't skip any of the higher end businesses is really what I'm talking about. So if it's like, if it's a giant factory with 500 employees, maybe your trainer can be with you when you approach them in case they actually want to set up an enrollment and you're like, I'm not sure how to do an enrollment with 500 people. But you can still do approaches for any type of industry if it's like not a giant corporation, right? So if it's a doctor's office, a lawyer's office, real estate, CPA, I don't care if it's your first day in the field, guys, do not skip those higher income businesses. That's so important. And you might not understand why just yet, but I'm going to do my best to make it make sense for you guys. So I've talked to plenty of agents who skipped those businesses because they were intimidated. I don't want to talk to a lawyer. I think he's going to be mean. I don't want to talk to a doctor. They're not going to want to talk to me about this or something like that, making up excuses. And maybe they don't want to waste the opportunity. They wanted to wait until they were better. Guys, I can promise you there are aces in doctors' offices. There are aces who are lawyers. Some CPAs, some real estate brokers, they're going to just get it. It's going to make sense to them. They're going to say, sign me right up. And there's going to be rude people in every industry too. It's not like all lawyers are the same or all doctors are the same. But there is a difference between different types of clientele. Let me tell you a story of two agents. So we have Agent One. Agent One, in their first 3 months, they got really good at working a niche market of auto parts stores, oil change places, cell phone stores, dollar stores, and they avoided all the higher end businesses because they're like, hey, I want to increase my skill level before I go into those businesses. And this was going pretty well for them. You know, they made a bunch of sales. They got plenty of referrals to other businesses in that same chain or franchise or industry. They did deal with some rejection, of course, but it wasn't too bad because they had tons of names from other dollar stores and other auto parts stores that they could use. So the rejection wasn't too bad once they kind of got in the swing of things. Their only complaints were that the policies they sold were generally pretty small, you know, maybe $50 a month on average. And they had a higher than average amount of cancellations due to bank returns because of insufficient funds. Essentially, the people they were selling to didn't really have the money to pay for the policies, so the policies canceled themselves after Family Heritage tried to draft 3 times because there was no money to be had from that person. So that was Agent One's situation. They sold $60,000 in their first 3 months. So that's about 20,000 a week, about a green out a, excuse me, 20,000 a month, about a green out a week. And their A to T was 90. So average A to T, that's active to target, average cancellation is 100. So they had a lower than average A to T because they had more people cancel than average. Now, agent number 2, they did not have a niche market. In their first 3 months in the business, they walked into every single business. Everything from the flower shop with 1 person working there to the biggest real estate office in town with 30 realtors that worked there. And they got rejected all over the place, at the dollar store and at the lawyer's office, because their approach wasn't very good and they needed to work on their confidence and assumptiveness and acting like they were supposed to be there. And they had a couple of clients every week. Some were store managers at local chains, and some were business owners who gave referrals to other business owners. Now, just because you get a referral doesn't mean that person's going to buy, and these referrals didn't always pan out, but Agent 2 diligently followed up on them anyway. They always went to see their referrals, and they always used names. And when he got referred to business owners from, you know, different industries and different tax brackets, he learned the lingo of the higher income businesses. And he gradually learned how to build the need for those people, for people who maybe aren't too worried about missing a few months of work. And Agent 2 didn't sell nearly as many policies as Agent 1 did in their first 3 months, but Agent 2 also didn't have nearly as many cancellations. Therefore, Agent 2's A to T ratio was 110. So he sold about half of what Agent 1 sold. He sold about 10,000 a month. But his A to T was 110. So he had far less than average cancellations. That was a really good A to T. Well, like we're learning, you guys, phase 1 doesn't last forever. So this was what their lives looked like in phase 1. So Agent 1 in phase 1, only going to certain businesses. Agent 2 in phase 1 went to every single businesses. Phase 1 lasts maybe 3 months at the most. Well, let's see where these agents were in 6 months. After 6 months, Agent 1 had been to all of the low-income businesses in their area. They'd been to every dollar store, every fast food chain, every quick oil change place. And now they're like, hey, I've done all this and I'm confident. I know what I'm doing. I've got a ton of names from everybody who works at the dollar store who's my client. And they decided to tap into the market of real estate, doctors, lawyers, CPA, things like that. And then with that, they faced a whole other round of rejection that they hadn't seen since their first week in the business. They were experiencing stuff they had not really seen before: gatekeepers, secretaries, owners who are really busy and they're cut into the chase. Hey, what are you selling? Who are you? What do you want? Who wouldn't really get a word in. And different things like office managers. And they weren't really sure how to handle some of the procedures and the lingo. They didn't really know how to feel like they belonged and fit in into some of those offices. Also, no one really knew anyone on their names list. because the doctors and lawyers didn't tend to be friends with the people who worked at, McDonald's and the dollar store and things like that. And then agent one would often try to go back and reservice their existing clients. But those who were still on the books could rarely afford to get additional policies. They already paid for an accident and ICU plan. They can't really afford to get a cancer plan right now. Things are tight. $50 a month is already a lot for them. And it felt like people were canceling at the same rate that they were signing up. He felt like he was taking one step forward and two steps backwards. So agent one experienced just a massive dip in confidence, and they stopped wanting to get out of their car. They didn't feel like going and approaching all those people and getting rejected. They weren't used to getting rejected anymore because they had had a time where they were working a niche market and that didn't happen as much. And they decided they didn't have what it takes, and then they quit. Now, agent number two, where is agent number two after 6 months? So after 6 months of practice, they are very comfortable with all types of businesses. They're so confident they can walk into anywhere. And they especially enjoy working with high-end real estate agents and personal injury lawyers. Because those people, they saw the need, they understood the product, and their average monthly premium was like $300 a month. Because at their income level, if a lawyer is making $300, $400 an hour, he can sure spend that in a month on some policies. That's no problem at all. And they're in no danger of canceling. They're not going to have insufficient funds in their bank account. Agent two still worked with all types of businesses. It's not like they just worked with lawyers or doctors' offices. They still went to all different types of businesses. But at this point, they were working mostly referrals. And their clients tended to refer them to other potential clients in a similar tax bracket. So they're not really referring agent two to the dollar store or McDonald's or Valvoline. They're referring them to other real estate offices, other doctors, CPAs, and lawyers. And agent two still got rejected plenty of times. The rejection didn't go away, but they were used to it at this point. They're like, yep, that happens. That's part of the job. No big deal. So what? Who's next? Agent two understood that nobody closes 100%. And they were still just looking for those cool, open-minded people. So agent two knew when he was dealing with a face card or a number card and was able to keep going and find those aces. And they also had the skill level now to protect some of those face cards. They knew their rebuttals. They were really, really confident where if somebody gave them an objection, they didn't hesitate to respond to that. And now at this point in their career, agent two is able to write an eagle with just 4 or 5 clients because they're getting bigger policies. And when they did whole enrollments with those types of folks, they had some weeks or days where they sold more than they did in a whole month when they were new. Because remember, in phase 1, agent 2 was averaging 10,000 in sales a month. Now sometimes they write 10,000 in a day. Totally different dynamic at this point. And agent 2 has a decent sized book of business now that it's growing every day, and they will be able to reservice and add to that book of business for years to come in the future. So who would you rather be? Right? Of course, nobody joins this career so that they end up like agent 1, but also nobody wants to do, or I should say, people don't realize what it takes to do to be agent 2. Guys, the secret is successful agents do what agent 2 did, even though it's harder and it's not very fun in the beginning. They do get kind of dragged through the mud and plenty of rejection for a while, but then they come out stronger on the other side with a much more sustainable business. Guys, it's about sustainability, sustainable selling. Why would you quit your last job and go through sales school and go through field training and do all this just to quit after 3 months? That is a waste of your time. If you're here, you need to be here for the long run, and you need to do what it takes to make it work for the long term. Right? Don't skip businesses. That's the takeaway here, guys. Future you will be glad that you didn't do what so many agents end up doing, just like agent 1. You're going to want to be like agent two. If you're already going through the learning curve with demoing and getting rejected, you might as well do all of your learning at once. You might as well get rejected at the dollar store and then get rejected at a lawyer's office instead of waiting to get rejected at all the lawyer's offices in 6 months from now. You don't want to do that. That's not as fun at all. Just get it all over with at this point. You're actually ready a lot sooner than you think to demo those, higher end businesses, because some of them are just really cool people too. And if you're a cool person and you know your demo and you're decent to hang out with, which obviously you are, we wouldn't have hired you, then they're going to like you too. They're not that scary. And at this point in your career, it should be a goal of yours to have some enrollment set. You should have at least maybe a goal of at least one every week. If you can do more than that, that's even better. And those are kind of like the big rocks in your schedule. And then you plan to cold call around them. So if you have an enrollment on Wednesday at noon, Wednesday morning, you should be cold calling, trying to set some stuff up for later in the week. You don't ever stop cold calling, otherwise you would run out of things in the pipeline. So your cold calling time is going to diminish, but you're going to use that time to set stuff up so you always have something to look forward to. So your cold calling hours are going to be fewer per week, but they're very important. So when you are demoing a manager, you still want to try and get the manager or the owner protected on the spot, but you do want to add that line in your buying atmosphere. Basically, I'll run you through it, and when I get done, if it makes sense for you, we'll get you protected, just like all these people on my names list. And if it doesn't make sense, that's totally okay. We'll still talk about how we're going to make this available to your employees. Then you finish your demo, close the manager if it makes sense. And then you say, okay, awesome. So there's 2 ways we work with businesses, and you give them the choice of 2 positives. You need to say this confidently, as if you do this all the time, even if you've never actually successfully set up an enrollment before. Don't expect the manager to tell you how it's going to work or help you make it happen, because you're the professional. You're the one who should be telling them how it's going to go. There's 2 ways we work with businesses. Some businesses, like this one and this one and this one, they have some kind of a morning meeting or a monthly meeting of some kind, and we just came in and we met with them all at once, talked for about 10 minutes, and handed out these survey cards. Hold up one of your guest cards. And everyone who wanted some more information, like prices, they checked yes. And everyone who didn't, they checked no. And we just followed up with the yeses, leave the no's alone. Super simple. Or some businesses like this one, this one, this one, it's a little tricky for them to pull everyone off the floor all at once. So what we did with those types of industries is we would just get a roster with everyone's name, and I would just catch up with folks one at a time, just meet with them for 30 seconds and see if they wanted to learn more. Which of those 2 options would make more sense for you guys here? And just wait for them to reply. Choice of 2 positives. And finally, the last big thing to fill your pipeline is to get referrals from everyone you meet, even if they don't buy. Then you'll not want to go on wild goose chases to chase referrals. If you guys want to screenshot this page here, by the way, you can. There's 2 ways we work with businesses if you want some of that, some lingo for you here. And I'll talk about referrals a little bit. So the way you want to follow up with referrals is kind of work them into your daily plan. So if there's some referrals that are kind of nearby, go see them sooner than later. But if there's some referrals in the next town or a bit of a further away location, hang on to those for a little bit until you've got a couple more referrals in that same town or that same area, and then make a day of it. Cool, I've got 20 referrals in the next town over. I'm going to go see all of them today. And that's my goal today, is just to get through this entire list and at least knock on every door, at least walk in every business. You can try calling people if you get referred to their phone number, but it's a lot easier to hang up or not pick up a strange number than it is to avoid a smiling, happy salesperson. So guys, in person is always going to be a lot more effective. So I don't recommend calling referrals if you're able to meet with them in person. But if you do have to reach out to them, you could try texting them first to let them know that you'll be calling. So typically what I would say is, you can screenshot this text if you want. So, hey, referral, this is Maria. Did the person who I demoed earlier tell you I'd be reaching out? Got a quick question for you. I'm going to call you in 5 minutes from this number. And if they get that, they'll probably be texting the person like, oh my gosh, who is this person? You know, and then you just give them a quick call. It sometimes works better that way than if you just call them out of the blue and maybe you have a different area code than they do and they don't pick up their phone if they don't know who it is. So that'll happen sometimes. You can use your CRM to make a route with your referrals. And if they're all in the CRM already, you can just, there's a way to make a route, which we can talk about a different day. And again, guys, get referrals from everyone, even if they don't purchase a policy from you. Even if they're a manager and they don't set up an enrollment, you still want to get referrals. If you just still ask, you still want to ask. You just want to get in the habit of asking. All right. Anybody have any questions or anything like that? Comments? Anything you'd like clarified?